What's up? So today I'm coming back from like a 2 to 3 month hiatus, due to the fact that for these past few months I've been working on a massive project, um, and basically now I'm free to start recording again. Um, you guys may or may not see the results of that project. I've been contemplating about how I'm going to film specific footage for it, like voiceovers, and basically splice everything together. And it might take a long time to edit, it might not. It might be a very short video, could be a medium to long size video. I'm not too sure how I'm going to do it yet, but I kind of have an idea that I may end up sharing that with y'all. So stay tuned for that. So anyway, for these past few months, 2 months, I should really say, I really didn't get to reading a whole lot in January, so it really didn't end up being a big deal that I didn't record a wrap-up specifically for January, because it was literally only one book. So I decided to wait until February, until the February books were read, because I knew I would read more, just because I would be sitting at a desk for longer listening to stuff. So that's exactly what I did. So I've waited until February's books were read, and now I'm ready to record the wrap up for both January and February. Currently, I'm recording this on March 7th of 2023. Not sure when this video is gonna go up. Hopefully, by the end of this week. It's a Tuesday. I'm hoping I will get this up before Friday at least. But yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. And that's what we're gonna shoot for. So this year, the year of 2023, I've set my goal for the year at 50 books. Currently, I've read 80 of those 50 books, and I'm on track in terms of numbers go. And that's 16% out of the goal. So let's start with the first book I read for this year, and that book was read in January, and it was the first and only book I read in January, and that would be Edge of Survival by Kyla Stone. Now, if you guys have been keeping up with my wrap-ups from last year, you would know that I've been reading this series. It pretty much went on forever. I mean, it was like what I would call a 7.5 book series. Kind of 8 books, if you want to call the prelude a novella, but I have been so invested in the series, and it just kept getting better and better. But after Edge of Anarchy, I feel like it was kind of going downhill a little bit for me, but I still ended up getting through the whole series. This is the 6th book in the Edge of Collapse series, about an EMP hitting before Christmas on Christmas Eve, and the type of chaos that would cause such a long-term event over the course of time. Would people survive? Who would be the first ones to die? How would people end up surviving a catastrophe like this? It answers and runs through a lot of those questions that people have about situations like this, and I thought it was very well done. I thought this series was very well done. Now, the 6th book in the series is about trying to remember what the 6th book was about. Let me go through here. Oh, okay. This is the one that I said I didn't like how it started off. I didn't like how this started off because it opened a page in the story that I thought we had already closed the book on, which was Liam's nephew, and Liam's basically, they weren't his in-laws, but they were his brother's in-laws, and he basically goes to see and find out what happened to them. And I don't know, I just thought it was very unnecessary, and I thought it was kind of a lame uh I don't know, I just thought it was added to the story for no apparent reason. Like, that's just the way I felt. um Although they try and make it sound like, this is something that he's been like, he hasn't been really focused on them too much at all because he's been too busy focused on the town and focused on the people that actually have to do with his life. But in this book, he goes back to try and rescue them, ends up bringing them back, which, like I said, I thought it was totally unnecessary. We had already closed that chapter, but the author decided to rehash that again. Not sure why, but she did. Um, um, Basically, I mean, that was the main thing that stuck out to me. Um, what else do we hear? Oh, okay, I remember what else happened. So after he comes back, um, Quinn, who's one of my favorite characters, in this book, ends up basically going to hunt down and look for, um, um, Matthias Sutter, basically, um, Rosamund's, right-hand man, and Rosamund Sinclair's right-hand man, and she was basically, the whole book is her getting into a whole lot of trouble, um, basically getting the whole town into a um, tizzy fit, no, into a stir. I don't even know if that's like a saying, but just disregard that entirely. Basically getting them all riled up, getting her grandmother all upset, over the fact that she basically up and left without telling them anything. And they only find that out after her lie basically ends up being figured out, and after they figure out that she lied, they all start to panic and wonder where she went. And then basically uh the little boy Milo ends up snitching on her, and everybody, once they find out where she went, is even a more um an even more higher state of panic. And basically, as soon as um you know um as soon as Liam comes back after going on his multi um hour day long trek back and forth to go find his brother's in-laws and his nephew, he's then forced to not even take a breath and take a break, and he's then basically thrown back into combat, trying to save the growing ever more and more foolish Quinn. So Quinn ends up thinking that she can infiltrate the group that Matthias Sutter has become a part of. Everything starts to fall apart. There's chases, there's captures, and towards the end of the book, that whole Matthias Sutter situation ends up getting handled, and then the second threat arises at the same time that Matthias Sutter, after what happens to him, then the second situation arises with the general, aka Rosamund Sinclair's father. That whole situation ends up coming into the fold towards the end of the book, although we don't really get a introduction to that whole thing. We just get a taste of what that'll be like leading into the second not the second book, the last book, the final book in the series. There were a lot of other small things that happened in this book, relating to the setting up of a barter system after months of a shit hits the fan scenario, specifically in EMP. We get other threats, mini threats in comparison to the large picture here that arise, and we get a clearer picture of what things would really look like after months have gone by. So yeah, I thought this book was great. Was good, but it wasn't great. So I gave it a 4 stars. So that was all I read for the month of January. It was literally just that one book. For the month of... Now, I was in between other books in the month of January, but I only had gotten to finish those in February. So the first book I read in the month of February, now that we're going into, was The Edge of Valor, which was the last book in the Edge of Collapse series by Kyla Stone. This book was about the final standoff between the General, aka Rosamund Sinclair's father, or Matthias Sutter's uncle. This book was... I really wish I could say it was what I had hoped for the last book, but I feel like as the series progressed, the writing started to get kind of sloppy. Like, I don't want to say it was terrible, because it's definitely not that, but I just want to say I could tell that the author was basically wanting to be over with this, and I totally get that. She wanted to be over with the story, and that's kind of evident when you're listening and reading this. It becomes kind of monotonous, and then it becomes kind of all over the place in the lead up to this battle. So you can kind of tell that the author just wanted to be over and done with the series. But with that being said, the final battle was definitely epic. It was definitely epic for a post-EMP apocalyptic world. The fact that there was aircraft and missiles and bombs being used in an EMP, a post-EMP scenario, was definitely, it was definitely wild, and I want to say after reading this whole series, I could totally see this as a show or something. because it was just very theatrical towards the end, and even throughout the whole book, it was very adaptable, is what I'm going to say. And I was not 100% disappointed with the ending, but I also wasn't entirely satisfied with it either, if that makes any sense. After the last book, they're basically thrust into a total new conflict. It's kind of like The Walking Dead. It's like conflict after conflict after conflict sort of situation, which is probably realistic. That's probably how it would be. There probably wouldn't even be a time to breathe in between all of those scenarios playing out. But what can I say about this book? There was a lot of drama leading up to the battle itself. There was a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of losses in the final battle. There was a lot of let me just say this. Plot armor on certain characters. There was only, out of the whole main cast of characters, there was only one that had actually died. And it was literally the one that you would have figured would have died anyway. Now, I'm not saying more characters should have died. I'm just saying there were a lot of characters that had very insane plot armor. And I'm not sure, in a story like this, I guess I'm happy that that's the case, but I'm also like, it's not realistic. Okay? That part isn't realistic. Basically, it was a fight to the very bitter end, and it was a fight that was very last minute, and certain things finally came into place at the very bitter end. And you know, things happen in the lead up to this battle that put all of the townspeople on edge, which is kind of, it's definitely realistic. Basically, the goalpost that the general keeps moving, it keeps moving and moving and moving, and even though they don't have, they're not 100% well equipped, they, meaning Fall Creek, is not 100% well equipped to fight this fight, they end up being forced into it sooner rather than later because they really have no other choice at this point, because they're literally knocking at the door, and so it's better that they initiate conflict basically first, so that they're in control of the fight first, and it just progresses and progresses and progresses. There were definitely times in this book, I cried, I teared up when that particular character had died, and definitely at the end, because it was such a beautiful ending. But it was a beautiful ending in the way that, I guess I can compare it to the last season of The Walking Dead that I recently watched, where it's kind of like a beautiful, bittersweet ending. Like, that community hasn't seen the last of the struggles, but yet, there's this one moment in time where basically they're all together, and it's just like ending a long show, basically. And it was definitely, I thought the ending was definitely well done. This book definitely had a different dynamic to it, though, when you added in LJ, Liam's nephew, and Liam's brothers-in-laws into this book. It definitely sets up a whole different dynamic in this book for me. I feel like in certain ways things have kind of shifted between everybody, because there's now more of a focus on not just Charlotte and Milo, but now also this extra kid, as well as him having to now worry about his brothers-in-laws as well, on top of all of what he's got going on already. I guess, it was a great, decent way to end the series. I don't think I could have asked for anything better. I also don't think I could have seen Kyla Stone write this any worse than she did. So overall, it was a decent ending. Most of the action was in the fight scenes, but I'd given that a 4 out of 5 stars as well. The second book I ended up reading in the month of February was America's Expiration Date, The Fall of Empires, Superpowers, and the Future of the United States by Cal Thomas. The foreword in this book was written by Peter Schweizer, I believe. I'm pretty sure. Actually, no, that's wrong. That's the other book I'm reading right now, I believe. So scratch that. That's not true. That's actually the book that I'm reading now. What to say about this one? I think this book did a really good job explaining. I thought this book was very relevant. I thought the parallels that he drew were very accurate and precise. I noticed a lot, more so than when this book was even published, that this book is just extremely relevant now, and I noticed a lot of the subject matter he brought up in this book is extremely relevant today, and it was kind of, he kind of predicted things pretty on the nose. Everything was pretty much on the nose, and I thought he gave the basically what this book ended up boiling down to is the system is flawed. There really is no way to rectify that fact. There's really no way to go about handling that fact in the law system, in any way that the system works. And so basically what this book boiled down to was the only hope we have is the Lord. And that this has to be from the bottom up. It can't be from the top down. It has to be from the bottom up. It has to be a grassroots building community, building connections level. Because this is not going to get fixed in this broken system. It's not going to get fixed in a traditional or conventional way. And I thought Cal Thomas did an amazing job writing this book, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The third book I read in the month of February. Oh, this was a good one, guys. This was definitely a good one. Now, this one is going to be one that I'm sure you guys have never heard of before. I never heard of it before. This is going to be one that you basically hear nobody talk about, unless they really love this man's voice, like I do. Around this time, I ended up getting into kind of like a Daniel Sharman obsession phase. I go through different phases when it comes to male celebrities. And I just became so intrigued by this man that I just wanted to hear more of his voice. And come to find out, he's narrated the all the Clockwork books in the Cassandra Clare series, the last 3 books on that spin-off sort of series, which I have not read yet because, of course, I haven't read the main set of books yet. But come to find that out, he read those in his regular British accent. Well, this book, he read in his American accent. And let me just tell you something right now. I went into this book reading it for listening to the audiobook just for his voice alone. I stayed because the story was actually pretty good. This book is called Winders by Ryan Onan. Sadly, this is the only singular book that I know of that Daniel Sharman has actually narrated, and this book I think was actually published. It was published in 2021, so actually not that long ago. And I'm bringing this book to your attention, not just because it was a decent plot line, but because it's not talked about a whole lot. And there's a lot of famous people that go in to do audiobook narrating, and just to me are not that great. One of those I would name would be James Franco, off the top of my head right now. And so you have, regular actors making the shift into audiobook narrating. And I actually love that, right? Especially if they have a good voice. I'm bringing up this book to everybody's attention because he actually has a decent voice, and more than decent. He has a beautiful, amazing voice. I want to hear him narrate every single book I've ever read, okay? This was narrated so well, and I think it was about like 10 to 12 hours worth of narration, I believe. I could be, maybe it was on the lower end of things, maybe it was like 8 to 10 hours. His voice is amazing. His voice, I'm just going to be very honest. I want him to read everything. I wish every author would just hire him, and this is me coming out and saying, because like I said, I haven't heard anybody talk about the fact that he's narrated this book, probably because it is so new, and probably because nobody would think that he would make the leap into audiobook narrating. But I just want to say this one thing. Because nobody has talked about this, I will be the first one to say this. Daniel Sharman needs to become a regular audiobook narrator. He needs to put this in as part of his permanent career. In other words, he needs to do this way more often. He needs to start reading. He needs to become an audiobook narrator, because I think a lot of people would actually, I know, I'm not the only person that would love this. After listening to this book, I can't tell you how sad I was at the end when I realized that there were no other books that I could listen to of his after the fact. I was so upset. I was so upset, guys, because I couldn't possibly listen to those other books because I hadn't even read the full Mortal Instruments series yet. So I couldn't possibly hop into the Infernal Devices. And I was so sad about that, guys. I was so sad. But his voice is audiobook material, it's podcast material. I don't know if anyone's ever told him that before, but somebody ought to, so I'm going to say it now. Anybody can clip this, send this to him. Hopefully, maybe in there's a chance in hell that he could possibly be listening to this. I don't know. I'm not sure. But Daniel Sharman, if you're out there listening to this, you need to pursue this, not just as a hobby, but as a career, because your voice is made to narrate, to talk, to speak over a microphone. It literally is. And, after this, because I was so deprived of his voice, I went to go listen to his podcast. And, not gonna lie, I was kind of disturbed at some of the stories. But I continued listening anyway because that's just how good his voice is. And sadly, though, well, I mean, both of his voices are nice, but I would say I prefer the American accent more. And that was another thing that impressed me about this, is not many British actors would sit in front of a microphone for 10 hours straight, or how many ever, 2-hour breaks, 3-hour breaks, whatever it was. Sit in front of a microphone using their not native accent, narrating an audiobook. I thought that was extremely impressive, because I know that if I had sat in front of a microphone for that long and read an audiobook in my non-native accent, if I read it in a British accent or in whatever accent I decided to pick, I would get so irritated by the sound of my own voice that it just wouldn't even be funny. And I would just get so, my vocal cords would get so strained from it that it would just become so annoying. So that's why this audiobook was even more impressive to me, because I know that probably took a toll, but it was totally worth it for the end result, because I loved it. I loved every moment of it, and somebody ought to start a petition and tell Daniel Sharman that he needs to become a full-time audiobook narrator. Okay? That should be, I mean, at least part-time. At least part-time. But anyway, I know talent when I hear it. I know talent when I see it. And let me tell you, that was talent. That was talent. So what is this book about, do you ask? Okay, I get it. Daniel Sharman has the most beautiful voice on planet Earth. What is this book about? It is about I don't know if I want to call it teenager. I mean, that's what I'm going to call it, because I think he was in high school. So it's about a teenager in New Brunswick, New Jersey, which is so funny to me because literally, I mean, right around the corner from this place. But so I thought this was even funnier to imagine Daniel Sharman in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Anyway, this book is about a teenager, and his name is Charlie, and he's in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and he goes to this high school, but and he lives with his friend Ducky and his grandmother. It basically was adopted by them, basically, because his mother had not died in a car crash, but died of some weird illness after almost getting into a car crash, and his friend Ducky's parents ended up dying in a car crash, I believe. Okay. So, basically, there's kind of like a brotherly love kind of thing going on there. Charlie's white, Ducky is black, and so is the grandmother, I believe. And basically, the whole book is starting off with them, and that whole story about what had happened to his mother and what happened to Ducky's parents, and basically they're bonding over parental loss, and their relationship growing up, whatever. Um, and basically they're coming of age. And it goes through different experiences they go through in high school, girls, problems with other boys, whatever. And basically, the part of the story that leads us into what the story is about is they end up going to some sort of Rutgers campus party and frat party, whatever, on the Rutgers campus. And there's a series of events that happen that are like really fucked up, twisted, in relation to Charlie and Ducky's girlfriend, and things basically take a turn for the worst. But Charlie somehow has the ability to go back and reverse and all of what had happened, which is exactly what had happened to his mother when him and his mother had almost gotten into the car crash. So basically, he conjures up the ability to do that again. And once he goes through the series of events again, basically, or kind of sees things happening the way that they almost did again, he realizes that there's something basically seriously wrong with him. And there's also seriously something wrong with Ducky's girlfriend. And so he basically storms out of the place, has like a mixture of emotions of confusion, anger, and basically bolts out of the house, bolts out of the way of Ducky and his girlfriend and whatever, and spends the night sleeping in an alleyway, I guess. And when he wakes up, there's a mysterious man that tells him that he's basically like nobody else. He's got secret superpowers, whatever, and to meet him in New York City. And so from that point on, Charlie leaves to go to New York. He basically lies his way out of staying there in New Brunswick with his friend and his friend's grandmother, and is like, basically, yeah, I've got an opportunity in New York, see you whenever I see you. And so he goes to New York on the train, meets up, comes across this mysterious girl on the train, and basically the whole story is about him finding out that he's got this basically superpower to go back and reverse time, and he has the ability to not just reverse time but freeze time and manipulate time, and he's got these superpowers. And the whole book is about his journey on finding out who he is, how he's able to control those things, that superpower, and eventually finding out the hierarchy of things and meeting this girl, Juniper, the prodigy. And it's just a really interesting book, and they end up becoming basically a thing, and then they're having to fight more evil winders, which is what these non-humans are called. They're called winders, and basically they go on a whole adventure trying to subdue the more evil ones and their powers. So yeah, this book was really interesting. I would totally say if you like Daniel Sharman, if you like sci-fi, you're gonna like this book. Okay, I don't need to sell it anymore. It's really good, and I'm surprised that more people haven't talked about it. So that was a 4 out of 5 stars. Honestly, I probably could have given it a 5 out of 5 stars, but the story really, truly, in terms of sci-fi, the whole superpower thing is not really my cup of tea, although I stayed because it was a decent story. But I can't give it a 5 out of 5 stars, because that just wouldn't be honest of me. Even though I really would give the audiobook narration a 10 out of 10 stars if I could, a million out of a gajillion stars if I could, or a gajillion out of gajillion stars. It was just that his voice was that good, and it was lovely, lovely. He needs to do that as like a full-time job. Okay. The 4th book I read in the month of February was called Does the Noise in My Head Bother You by Steven Tyler. Now, there's a whole... I read this book for research purposes, and research purposes only. And I can genuinely say that this has got to be the most disturbing book I've ever read in my life, and that's saying something. Okay. The definitely most disturbing book I've ever read out of my life was American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. That book was so disturbing that about a quarter of the way through, maybe a little bit more than a quarter of the way through, I had to seriously DNF it and actually sell it just so I could get it out of my house because it was that disturbing to me. This book is almost as disturbing, and it's the only book that I'll ever finish that is this disturbing. I forced myself to read the entirety of this book because for research purposes. Now, if you don't know what's going on, now I've got to be very careful about the way I word this because he's got a habit of wanting to threaten to sue people. Okay. Cough, cough, Nick Cannon, Vlad TV. There's a case that's going on now that, I think it's civil, it might be criminal, I'm not sure. But it's about his relations with a girl that was actually mentioned in this book. And, let's just say less than, oh wow, how do I word this? How do I word this? The whole case is about some really, disturbing, less than palatable, excursions, and goings-ons, and, relations, and that's what this whole book is about. This whole book is about how he started to where he kind of finished, and I know, let me just put it this way. If you want a insight into how rock stars were basically treated and their special treatment and they're really wild, more than wild, in a lot of cases I would say bordering on legal situations. If you want to get an idea of how their life actually was, and how it was in those times, and how there were things that were accepted that should have never been accepted, listen to this book, read this book. But only read this book if you're willing to come to almost vomiting in your mouth. If you have a problem with the hypersexualization of extremely young, I don't even want to say women, females, and you're really invested in this case, that you have no problem or you have some problem with it, but you can get through it. If you're so invested in this case that you want to put yourself through this type of torture, read this book. This book is so more than disturbing. I'm surprised. See, this is what I mean. How is it that people get canceled over the dumbest shit ever? I mean, the dumbest shit ever. But books like this are allowed to, first of all, be published. And second of all, I mean, not only published, but things like this are just widely accepted. Um, oh, that's just how it was. Oh, that's just what it was, and this, that, and third. Um, just plainly making excuses for the most disgusting behavior ever. And I don't know. After reading this book, guys, I'm just like really in a state of confusion as to um how this guy is not canceled. How is this not being more widely talked about? How is it that for so many years this has been overlooked? I don't know. I'm still kind of flabbergasted after reading this book, guys. It really left me speechless. Um, the amount of, I mean, the drugs wasn't even the most absurd part of this book, guys. I mean, that was a given, right? I mean, the rock stars, they're whatever, they're doing lines behind the scenes, whatever. Um, they're dressing flamboyantly, all the different types of clothes, how much money they spent, all this type of stuff. That's not what was shocking, guys. What the most shocking part of this book was the fact that this book was written by Steven Tyler. And the fact that he thought it was okay to publish this, and that he thought he could get away with publishing this and get away with saying what he said and seeing no problem whatsoever at all with what he said and what he did, and not even taking any accountability whatsoever at all for any of what he did. Really, truly. And it was like such a twisted, like really getting into the mind. So, I mean, this guy is beyond twisted. Beyond twisted, beyond insane, beyond creepy. I mean, this is like if Jeffrey Epstein wrote a book. Um, and that's an opinion. That's me giving my opinion. That's not a statement of legal fact. Okay, but this is like, to me, listening to a Jeffrey Epstein sort of person talk like. And like I said, this is not a statement of legal fact. This is purely an opinion. This is purely my opinionated statement right here. So, but I'm just disturbed, guys. I'm just disturbed. And looking into this whole thing even more, this case, and just this scene in general even more, I just keep digging up more and more and more and more crazy ass stories by going down this rock star rabbit hole. It's just like, wow. It's just like there's so many. There were so many. I mean, it was just, wow. What a time. What a time. And the way in which it's not even just the fact that these things happen, it's the way in which Steven Tyler describes them in such disgusting accuracy and perversion. It's just like, wow. It's like really like, wow. This man ought to be locked up in an insane asylum. In my opinion, this man should be nowhere near um any females of any age. And even I mean, guys, there was a lot of stuff that was really bordering on legality here in this book, and I'm just like, wow, he literally wrote this. Nobody is talking about this. I'm like, how is this so overlooked? How is this so overlooked in the Me Too, quote unquote Me Too era? I'm just like sitting here like, wow. Yeah, even a month after reading this book, I think this has left a serious um impression on me on how twisted this man is. I mean, guys, most of the stuff that was mentioned in this book, I can't even say on YouTube because it was that bad. Most of the stuff that was mentioned is I can't even mention to anyone because it was that bad. So it's kind of like if you read this book, you know, sort of thing. But other than that, I really can't even go much more into this subject because, first of all, his lawyers, and second of all, it's too damn graphic. It is too damn graphic. I gave this book a 1 star. I would give it a 0 stars if I could, to be honest with you. That's how disturbing this was. And that's no over-exaggeration. I thought years ago when Nick Cannon talked about this that it was over-exaggeration and maybe he was playing things up a little bit, but no. Steven Tyler literally wrote all of this and thought nothing of publishing this book, thought nothing of what he was saying, thought everything was okay what he was saying. It's just mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling, guys. I mean, really. If it was just him talking about drugs and, you know, what I would consider, you know, actual women, female, you know, regular hookers, I would have been like, okay, you know, I would have kind of been able to get through. But guys, I mean, this is like, you know, after listening to this book, the one thing that sticks out in my mind is for years, and I'm not a Donald Trump fan at all, but I'm just saying, it's just weird how society works. For years, people complained about the whole Trump hot mic grabbing other women's, you know what's, comment. That pales in comparison. That comment pales in comparison to the entirety of this book. The entirety of this book. And honestly, Steven Tyler has made Donald Trump in that clip, in that hot mic, he's basically made Donald Trump look like an altar boy. Okay? Like a literal saint. So, if you want to be disturbed, creeped out, if you want to get into the mind of a predator, we can at least say he's a predator at the most, right? Without getting, you know, all types of, I mean, guys, listening to this book, listening to this, his own words, we can confidently say he's at least a predator. I think he's a little bit more than that, but I can't say that legally. But what I can say without a shadow of a doubt is these are very predatory remarks, predatory behavior. And at the very least, and at the very least, and it's disturbing. If you want to be disturbed, if you want to throw up, if you're looking to lose some weight and want to throw oh my god, that's terrible. Not as terrible as this book. If you want to throw up, if you want to be sick, physically sick, read this book. You know, if you want to know more about the case and have no problem with all of that, and guys, there were so many times I came close to DNFing this, but I had to get through it because I need to know this case. And I need to know if I needed to know if it was as bad as Nick Cannon said it was years ago. And guys, it is and it's worse. It is and it's worse. So, like I said, there's a case going on. I kind of really hoping that, you know, he gets locked up and they throw away the key. Because honestly, truly, I mean, he talks about going to rehab, for drugs. He should have went to rehab for just more than drugs. If you want to be very clear and very honest. And I don't even think rehab would have fixed this man's brain. And even the title, does the noise in my head bother you? He's telling you that he knows that he has a problem. He's telling you he knows his brain is all fucked up. That is telling you something. I mean, the fact that he would even name his book that, and it had the type of content in it as it did, he has a problem. And he knows he has a problem. And so this man ought to be locked up, in my opinion. This man needs to go away for a long ass time. They need to throw his ass in with R. Kelly, Ghislaine, and, all these folks. Weinstein, all of them. He needs to go to jail. He needs to go to jail. And, that, again, my opinion, at the very least, he needs to be sued for everything he has. So, yeah, I think this is despicable. I think he's a garbage human, and I think more people need to talk about this problem. Okay? More people need to talk about this problem because it's disturbing. It's disturbing. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. And a woman in which that is suing him or whatever's going on with that, that story was, he used her. There's no other ifs, ands, but he used her. Period. And it's sick. And judgment needs to be brought down on this man, is what I'm saying. Very frustrating to listen to. Very frustrating. So if you want to come close to, vomiting or throwing your phone across the room or breaking a bunch of shit, I mean, wanting to beat this man's face in, metaphorically speaking, read this book. And if you want an idea, like I said, of just that whole scene in general, because it's not just him. I've went down the rabbit hole a little bit on this, and I will more in the future. But there's even a whole documentary on this stuff. And I'll see if I can edit that in here. This whole documentary on this scene. And it was like, I don't know if you guys remember that story years ago that Chris Hansen ran on Dobby Vanity, but it's like Dobby Vanity level stuff, and it's no wonder that, when you look at the rock scene, that there's like a serious, there's something to be said about the level in which that predatory nature has been embedded into that scene since the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Anyway, moving on from that disgusting, filthy human being. In the month of February, I actually listened to the audiobook version of Prodigy and Champion by Marie Lu because I love their love story so much that I just kind of wanted to refresh my memory on the story, and also I needed something that really I knew would keep me interested while I was painting. So I reread Prodigy, I reread Champion, I listened to the audiobooks for the first time this time, and they were great. And I just, oh my god, I love them so much. Day and June are just like amazing. So, years ago when I read Prodigy, I gave it a 4-star, and years ago when I read Champion, I gave it a 5-star. So I had reread those, and those were definitely good. So those were my, so that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th and 6th books, and then the 7th book I read in the month of February was called Hunt for the Skinwalker. Science confronts the unexplained at a remote ranch in Utah. I gave this book a 3 stars because it was kind of mediocre. It didn't really tell me much I didn't already know from watching the show. I mean, there were some other cases that they brought up that I guess were kind of interesting. It just didn't capture my attention a whole lot. And I'm not the only one that thinks this, after looking through these comments here. And So it was all right. I mean, it talked mostly about the scientific experiments that were done at this ranch, and what happened with the family prior to that. Um, and I don't know, it was all right, but it didn't capture my attention a whole lot, and it wasn't anything new that I feel I learned. So, I gave it a 3 stars. It was all right. So that's about the amount of those are the books that I read for the first 2 months of the year. I hope maybe you guys got something out of this, or maybe got an idea for a book that you may want to read or whatever. Yeah. So currently, if you guys want to know what I'm currently reading Spare by Prince Harry, because there's a lot of controversy going around about that book, and I'm kind of curious. I mean, I'm not totally invested in the royal family. I don't know why any American would be, but it is an interesting read, and I guess I'll elaborate on that more next month. And then after that, well, it's a no-brainer. I've got to read Daisy Jones and the Six now, because everybody and their mothers is talking about the show. Not only are they talking about the show, I've listened to the full soundtrack, and I've got to say I'm obsessed with Sam Claflin's voice. I can't believe that he actually sang those songs. It's just like a blessing. Blessing my ears, blessing all of our ears, quite frankly. I'm very impressed with, I don't even know how to pronounce her last name, so I'm not even going to try, but Riley's vocals, it's just top notch. It's just top notch stuff. And then I keep seeing trailers for the damn thing, and I'm like, I really am not trying to get spoiled on the book of the show. So it's kind of a no-brainer. I kind of started like the first 20 minutes, and I'm like, this is good. This is really good. And I think after, after seeing the trailer, and I could be totally wrong on this, but it's definitely giving Fleetwood Mac Civil Wars vibes. And the reason why I say that is just because, I don't know, like the tension that is between those two characters, it really reminds me of the Civil Wars, like before they broke up. But anyway, I have total faith that this book is gonna end up being one of my favorites of all time. And I also have a strong feeling that so will the show, and I honestly can't wait. None of you bitches better spoil it for me. That's all I know. And I don't know. I just can't wait till I end up seeing the show, because I know it's gonna be amazing. I know that I mean, they worked on this show for a long time. It looks like, and from what I've heard. And I know it's going to be A1. I know everybody's going to be talking about this. And just Sam Claflin, he just continues to deliver for us. I mean, right, guys? I mean, he just continues to deliver. I'm very excited, thrilled that he got into a booth and made these and recorded these songs. We have these songs forever now to listen to on repeat, which is just amazing. This is an amazing gift that they've given us. And now we've got an entire show that we can watch with him in it. Absolutely lovely. And they would be fools to not, well, that's an idea that they'll probably end up having, and I don't know if they'll end up doing it. But to me, when stuff like this is done, I feel like, the actors from the shows or movie, whatever is adapted, they should do an audiobook version of the book. I mean, that's just how I feel, but anyway, I can't wait to read the book. I know it's going to be amazing. After I finish Spare, which I'm probably like only 4 hours away from finishing. once I finish that, I'm going to start Daisy Jones and the Six, and then from there, I'm going to binge watch the hell out of that show. And actually, the way I'm doing it is really smart because there's a lot of people right now that have read the book and are having to wait for each episode to come out, for the more episodes to come out. And the way that I'm doing it is kind of smarter because while you guys are waiting for the episodes, I'm reading the book, and then by the time I finish the book, all the episodes will be out. That's called big brain thinking. So anyway, I was actually going to read it last year, but I never got a chance to because I was in the middle of that 7-book series. But now that oh my gosh, now that I've listened to the soundtrack, there's just no way that I can't read the book now, and there's no way that I can't watch the series. So, but I'm going to read the book first because that's the smart thing to do, and I can't wait to finish it. So, yeah. So, that's pretty much all for today. If you guys had any great books that you guys want to recommend down below in the comment section, throw them in there. If you've, no spoilers, but if you've read Daisy Jones and the Six, if you've read it, you can let me know what your thoughts are. If you've watched the show, you can let me know. I mean, I already know it's gonna be amazing, but whatever comments you guys have, you can throw it in the comment section below. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, and till next time, bye guys.